Hey guys, we're Rachel and Christa, co founders of Boulder Business Solutions and the Becoming Bolder program, and this is In Full Volume. Each week, we have real, honest conversations about navigating change, redefining what success looks like, and building a life that actually feels good to live, not just one that looks good on paper. So let's turn down those expectations, turn up what really matters, and get into today's conversation. Krista, what are we talking about today?
I'm really excited. So last week we shared we kind of shared like that in the beginning and how we got started. And you and I got to have a really fun conversation yesterday deciding with the topic today. And I really
Yeah,
like what we landed on, and that is this. What exactly do we mean when we say transformation? Because as we discovered yesterday, transformation can mean very different things to very different people and different things during different seasons. So today, let's kind of dive into that. Let's kind of tear into that a little bit, and have that. Yeah, let's see what transpires. This is going to be really fun. Share
yeah,
with me. Let's kick it off this way. Share with me what started our conversation about it yesterday.
yeah, absolutely. So, um, as many of you may not know, I really, really like to write, and I do actually have a blog that I write every week. And one of the conversations that I had was about evolutionary change versus revolutionary change. And I think transformation is just a really fancy word for saying change. And I really and I think that's really how that conversation started, was just how does transformation look for every individual, and what does that really mean? Because we throw this word around, transformation, change, whatever, but what does that actually mean? And then more importantly, what do we do about it when it happens? Because it happens to everyone. And so I started exploring this idea of the difference between evolutionary change versus revolutionary change. And it really kind of boils down to this: change, or what we're going to refer to as transformation today, can really kind of be broken down into two different elements. One is the incremental change or transformation, which is small changes that you make consistently over time, that you don't really see those effects and you don't really see the difference or that transformation immediately, but that transformation does occur because it's broken down into small incremental steps along the way. That's something that you really refer to as habits. You're building these habits that transforms your life over a long period of time. And then there's a different kind of transformation, and that's immediate transformation. So think Britney 2008, immediate transformation. I'm shaving my head, starting over, making a statement. And those are a lot more explosive. The change or the effects that you see is a lot more immediate. So I think one way that I can explain this is maybe giving a couple examples for each. One would be for incremental transformation, deciding one day that I want to get healthier. I want to, exercise daily. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make that incremental change every day. Maybe that's I'm going to wake up 30 minutes earlier. I'm going to start my day just a little bit earlier so that I can go get my steps in as the first thing that I do every day. That is not something that you see that transformation quickly, but over time that transformation does exist, and because you have set that habit and it's something that you do consistently. And then on the flip side, you have immediate transformation. That could be something like, I have decided that I am in a bad relationship and I'm done. I do not want to be a part of this relationship anymore. I do not want to have this kind of negativity or toxicity in my life. So I am done. I am leaving this relationship. That is an immediate transformation. That those changes and that effect, you can see that immediately. That's something that really transforms your life within a few hours. And neither one is better than the other. They kind of happen in their own season and in their own time and kind of in their own way. What are your thoughts, Krista?
Um, just kind of reflecting back to our conversation yesterday is I think what most people, when they think of transformation, they have a tendency to discount the incremental type of transformation. Well, hello, Fred. We knew you were going to be making
Yeah,
an appearance at some point.
I know. This
Just
is my cat, Fred. We love him. He loves to show up at the most inconvenient
oh
times.
yes, yes.
Thank you,
It's
my
all about
dear.
him getting his 15 minutes or 15 seconds. Is he going to? Okay, and
I
there he
think
goes.
so. That was his 15 seconds of fame.
Okay,
Thank
bye,
you
Fred.
for making
It
your
was good.
appearance. Goodbye.
So that the incremental, I think so many people discount. That's not the right word. I don't think people tend to use the word transformation when it comes to the incremental. Those are the words where those are the situations where people are talking about. Well, I'm going to set a goal, or it feels it has a tendency to feel a little bit more finite and defined. Oh no, here it comes again. But that immediate, that drastic, that life is going to change. I'm going to do things differently, and boom, everything is going to shift. What I think people don't realize is that there's fallout from that, and it's and I'm not saying it's bad. Sometimes you kind of have to rip the band-aid off and do something drastic, but there will always be some kind of fallout, although the fallout may not
Yeah.
be bad. It reminds me of so when after my divorce, 98, 100 years ago, 1998, I had, I accepted a position I had been, not for a very long amount of time. I just always wanted to be a stay-at-home mom, and I got to do that for a very short season at the end of my marriage. Um, and after when we were going through the divorce, I had some wonderful relationships established. I was in the insurance industry in Wyoming, and was able to get a job very quickly. And I remember being at work one day and getting a phone call from another agency that I used to work with. We were like a brokerage, and got a phone call that said, "Oh my gosh, I heard you're working in an agency, personal lines. I need to save you." I was an underwriter, and I was offered a job, and I accepted it like that fast. And I went from one day to being a single mom in Casper with a support system and all the things to I just accepted a job in a different community where I don't know a soul.
Wow.
And it was, I think with those drastic, I like that immediate rush of it of I made this huge decision. When the
Yeah.
dust settles, that's when some of the problems can start to show up versus something as simple. I'm not going to say easy. Easy implies little or no effort. There's a lot of effort in incremental change.
Hmm.
But there is a certain degree of when the dust settles, the rose colored glasses come off. And then you have to go, whoa, I don't have a support system. I don't know
Yeah.
anybody. I had to find daycare and doctor and get the kids in school. And I did so many things once, not that I didn't know I had to do that, but then it was kind of cleaning up that, not even cleaning up, but navigating all of the things that one drastic thing changes. And I think a lot of people find themselves in a space of making an immediate change like
Yeah.
that can actually do more harm than good. And I'm not trying to take away from the value of it, but sometimes in the moment, the Britney of 2008 moment, it it can take a little bit longer to navigate it than something that is incremental. And I'm not saying one's better than the other at all. I'm just saying they're definitely different. Um,
Yeah, they're very different. And you know what? You really kind of bring up a really cool point that I really like between the relationship between incremental change and immediate change. You know, you had mentioned in your experience that the fallout after that immediate change, that decision that you made, there all of a sudden became all of these extra pieces that you needed to figure out. And I think that's the one important element about immediate transformation is that the actions that you take afterward in changing and settling into what your new normal looks like really kind of then boils down to the incremental changes that you make. I think that's where the two of them come together, where everything kind of boils down to, regardless of the decision that you made, whether it's an immediate change or an incremental change, no matter what you do, following it up with those small steps, reestablishing what your new normal looks like is always going to be at the heart of it, where it's always important for you to identify how can these little steps in this massive change that I'm making really help to figure out what does life look like for me now, in whether this is a change that happened to me because I made that decision, or whether it's something else that happened. Whatever that situation might be, what are the steps that you take afterwards to reclaim that kind of power in your own life?
yeah, definitely. And something that I think probably the part of the conversation we had yesterday that I appreciated the most was the just talking through and that realization of whether it's incremental, whether it is incremental or immediate, you chose. Like
Hmm.
we choose incremental change. We choose that drastic
Yeah.
immediate change. But there's a third type of change, and that is, that's kind of that. You have a one of your blogs you had talked about, the caterpillar becoming the butterfly and kind of being in that messy middle and being in the soup, and that immediately jumped into my head of, yeah, well, okay, here's an idea. What if you didn't make the change? What if you didn't make the decision? What if your partner left you? What if you lost your job? What if you got a health diagnosis? And that was a really interesting perspective as far as comparing it to that drastic immediate versus life happening because you made it happen, and life happening just kind of to you, and how to navigate that. I think a lot of people struggle with that.
Oh, yeah. I love that. I love that we have in this conversation, we've got this not so secret third layer of change, which is the change that you have no control over.
Yeah.
That I think is probably one of the most important kinds of change that we experience because, like you said, this is one we didn't choose, the ones that we had no control. And yet somehow we are responsible for that outcome.
Oh yeah.
That I think is so, so important and hard. So, since you shared an experience, I think I will share an experience for me where I found myself in the soup. For me, I was one of those lucky individuals that received a life-altering diagnosis, something that I had no control over. And when I found out that this is now what my life looks like, I didn't get to make that choice. That choice was made for me. And sometimes when that happens, actually, I think a lot of times what happens is that we now feel like we've lost control over everything. We can't even control things in our own lives.
Yeah.
For me, it was, so now I have this new normal that I don't know how to navigate. I wasn't prepared for it. And
You didn't
now
ask
I don't,
for it.
yeah, I didn't ask for it. And now I have to figure out what I have control over and what I don't. And in that moment, the rug gets ripped out from under you, it feels like you've lost control over everything. There's
Oh
nothing
yeah.
in your life that you actually feel like you have control over. And I think, and this is where biologically, this is where our fight or flight kicks in.
Oh
Because,
yeah.
or like more like fight, flight, or freeze, because now we've entered into this realm where, you know, I think we respond a couple different ways. Sometimes when we receive this kind of news, or when a decision is made for us, or something in our life changes and we had no say or no control over it, it now comes down to, um, some of us tend to feel like as we're trying to reclaim that control, we then go in this hyper control. We want to control everything. It's every single decision I am now going to decide, because I am never going to decide again that, or I'm never going to be put in that position again where I don't get to be out of control.
Yeah.
Or, and then there's the second option, which I experienced, which was I got this diagnosis. This was something that was out of my control. And now I don't feel like I have control over anything anymore. I don't know what so I just kind of lived in this soup, this period of stagnation where I don't really know what my life looks like. And that's, I think, where a lot of us exist, is this period of, when things happen to us,
Hmm.
now we have to re-identify, what do we have control over? What do we not have control over? And how can we navigate that so that we get to continue living our fullest life? And I still think, even when we experience this third level of change, which is the one that happens to us, I still think it comes down to those incremental changes that we decide every day, because at that point, that is something that never gets taken away from us. That is always something we always have power over, is deciding what are the small incremental steps that we're going to do in our lives to help us navigate whatever complexity comes up. And I think for me, when I got my that diagnosis, I had to revert back to, or not revert back to, that's not right. I had to, I think, kind of go back to basics, which was, okay, what does this look like? What are the changes that I can make every day in my life that I now feel like I am back in control? I have, I have power and authority over what happens to me. And it all comes down to those changes, that's maybe I take certain medication every day to make sure that um I don't have flare-ups, I don't have symptoms, um, and I don't end up going back to the big old hospital. Didn't like that. That wasn't fun. Um, or or other things, or, maybe that is implementing a different kind of diet or implementing exercise. And all of that is just going back to the basics, which was that incremental change. I think really that's kind of the foundation for all of the change that we experience.
Yeah. And I think it's really interesting how of these three, how closely they are, I don't want to say interchangeable, but how they kind of flow into one another.
They're
Um,
interconnected.
they are absolutely interconnected.
Yeah.
You know, when I made the decision to close my coaching business after 13 years in 2023,
Hmm.
I mean, it felt drastic. It wasn't just a spur of the moment thing. It took a lot of, thought and prayer and
Yeah.
not so gentle nudging from people who were, wiser than I was at the time. And what was so interesting is that, yes, that was that immediate, that drastic change, except it absolutely just dropped me right in the middle of the soup because I lost who I was. And
Yeah.
and so it was, okay, I made this great big decision and I'm going to do it. And then I had to sit with it for a while. And I got lost. I didn't know what to do. Even though I made the decision to close the business, it felt like it was happening to me.
Yeah.
I mean, and granted, it, with the pandemic and just there are reasons, and it's not good or bad or right or wrong, but it still felt like it was happening to me. And I
Mhm.
actually spent a pretty decent sized season sitting in that. And I don't recommend it, but it was how I reacted to what was going on around me, what was going on inside of me. And I think and you've alluded to this, I think when we can find ourselves in a space of having a level of awareness where we can
Yeah.
discern, okay, am I going to react to this or am I going to choose to respond? The more we step
Mhm.
into that space of, okay, it may not feel like I have a say in this for those of us that are in that, whether it's, that immediate or that super, whatever, um,
Yeah.
being able to find small things intentionally that let you respond to whatever that fallout might look like. That's the smartest, the wisest, not the fastest, but the wisest path back to getting into incremental change. Because life changes. That's just the way it is. Nothing stays the same. But the
Right.
more you can start to take those immediate drastic changes, the more you can take this thing happened and now I'm stuck, and start to do even the tiniest things to move yourself into incremental change, getting just small little
Yeah.
tiny little habits, baby steps, what I've always called with my clients.
Yeah.
That's when you can start mentally buying into the fact that you do have control again. You do have a say again.
Yes. And you know what? The thing about that is that is so hard to do. It is so hard. When you're in fight or flight, when you're essentially in that reactionary stage, trying to get into that higher level of thinking to go, okay, instead of reacting, maybe I should be responding. That is so hard to do. And I think that's something that a lot of us experience where we go, I mean, yeah, I know what to do. Logically, I know what to do. But in the moment, I'm going to react because my body is telling me this is what I need to do to feel safe, to feel like I can keep surviving. And I think that's where those baby steps come into play because ultimately our goal is to try to pull us out of that reactionary that reactionary period and into a place where we can respond. And it's hard. It is a hard thing to do and it takes practice and you have to keep doing it over and over again. And that's where we start with those baby steps. We start with, okay, how, when we enter into that period where maybe we just don't even
Mhm.
feel connected to our own selves anymore. I
Oh
think a
yeah.
lot of us experience that. I did. I completely disconnected from my body
Hmm.
entirely. And I think that's one of the things where we come back to how do we implement those baby steps to help get me reconnected back into my body. And it could be something as simple as just going for a walk. Or
Hmm.
for me, one of the first things that I did, it was I went outside and I took my shoes and socks off and I went and I stood in the grass and with my bare feet just because I needed to get back into a space where I could feel like I was connected back into my body. And then once I was able to do that, then I could start getting into how do I take these baby steps? How do I start making that incremental change? Because I don't want to live like this. I don't want these things that have happened to me to define who I am. That's something that never gets taken away from us. We always get to decide who we are and how we want to live. And yes, there's a lot of complexities that surround that. But at its very core, we always get to decide how change is going to affect us and what are we going to do once that change happens. I think that's really one of the key elements about transformation is that transformation is inevitable. We don't we can't shy away from it. It's always going to happen to us, but we
Hmm.
do get to decide what that looks like. We always get to decide.
Oh, definitely. Well, and You know, you and I have given examples that are pretty drastic. You know, ours have been
Yeah.
pretty major. But here's the thing: is I think so many of us, especially
Yeah.
high achievers, when it comes to any kind of whether it's the one, I think we're the ones who have a tendency to go, okay, everything is going to change overnight. We're going to do everything differently. Um, but even with, I think high achievers have a tendency. I know that I did for a really long time. Really struggled with incremental change because it's go big or
Mhm.
go home. It's I want to
Yeah.
change absolutely everything about my health. I want to change everything about my life or my career or my relationships or whatever. And I think what we have a tendency to do is because we have this go big or go home mentality around everything, we can easily get caught up in all of the things because we can easily identify 30 things that have to change right now today.
Mhm.
One of the things that one of the things that I love that we're teaching inside of Becoming Bolder is really kind of bringing things in and focusing on having that level of awareness, paying attention,
Yeah.
listening to your body, listening to your thoughts, even if they're lying to you, being able to discern, okay, this thought is not helpful to me. Um, and because of that, because of really focusing on that level of awareness, just paying attention, slowing down, feeling more connected, that sets us up to be much more responsive, far less reactive. And then we kind of allow ourselves to do the more incremental things and kind of, you know what I'm saying? Kind of like it's
Oh, yeah.
pull it back in. Instead of zooming out on everything and look at all the things, having that level of awareness lets you kind of pull it in and go, okay, so today's all I have. Tomorrow's,
Mhm.
tomorrow isn't a given. It hasn't happened yet. Yesterday's gone. Let's just focus on today. What is one thing in this area that I can do today that makes me feel a little bit more confident in the fact that I can make incremental change, makes me feel a little bit better about the decision that I made, this big decision, and now I'm trying to navigate it. I think awareness is one of the more valuable things. As simple as it may seem, it's not simple. It's not easy to do.
No, it really isn't. And I think I one of the hardest things for me has always been, and everyone in my life can attest to this, but I am notoriously impatient. And I think
Yes,
impatience, thank you.
it's
Yes,
so
I am.
bad. I do too. I am that way too. Not to the degree you are, but I'm impatient too.
Well, and I think part of that is when you are a high achiever, you have experienced a certain level of success. And because when you experience this level of success, it happens on your own timeline because you are just that good. And so that doesn't really lend itself to learning how to be patient, but
Oh yeah, you're right.
transformation does. Yeah. And that's transformation does. That's the thing
Mhm.
is no matter what happens in life, you're going to have to learn this because transformation is not, sometimes it's an overnight thing, but sustainable transformation, that that's the long game.
Mhm.
That takes a long time to do. And that's something that we are all working towards. And I love that that's one of the core elements that we really focus on in Becoming Bolder is learning how to slow down and to be okay with it and to start telling that impatient part of us to just stop for a minute. Listen to what's going on
Yeah.
inside and out so that you can learn how to become responsive and not reactive. And that's really how we can that's where that transformation really kind of settles in is when we stop listening to that impatient or impulsive part of us. We get to listen to the real version of us.
Yeah, I like how you snuck the word impulsive in there because that's me. You're
Impatient,
impatient and I'm
impulsive, pick an
impulsive.
I word. Yeah, I'm impatient, she's impulsive. We really are the embodiment of um what what it looks like to need to slow down and
Yeah.
just learn how how do we want to experience transformation in our own lives? How do we want it to be sustainable?
Yeah.
Well,
Well, and the cool thing behind that, forgive me, I just totally talked over you. Finish that thought.
it's okay. The thought has disappeared. Continue.
You know what? Just interrupt me right back when, when it comes back to you. Is that being able to slow down, being able to be proactive in your thinking, proactive in the actions that you're taking. Um, and I know that we've already, the things that you and I have shared have been like major life changing things. Okay. But sometimes for high achievers, everything can kind of have the same emotional and energetic fallout as that big
Mhm.
of a decision, because high achievers have a tendency to take on everything. They've got a ton of responsibility at work, they have a ton of responsibility at home, they are super active in their church or their community, or they're probably on a board somewhere, or there's
Yeah.
so many plates that are spinning that sometimes it feels like making that drastic change is the only option that they have, and that isn't true, and slowing down can kind of help that, even though it feels so against their nature.
Yeah, yeah. That's what's hard is that, there are there are some certain scenarios where a drastic change is kind of, the only foreseeable option that a lot of people can see, but there is always a period afterwards where you do need to take the time to slow down, because what ends up happening is, you make one drastic change, but you don't let the dust settle, or you don't start putting the pieces back together. And then another drastic change happens, and then another. All of a sudden, your life has now turned into a cyclone. And where do you find yourself in the midst of all of that? Where where is you, who you are as a person, your identity, your well-being, your safety, all of that gets lost in this cyclone of drastic changes. There the downtime exists for that reason, to be able to recover from those kinds of drastic changes that do happen, whether it's a decision that you make or one that has been made for you, or something that happens to you. There is always that downtime, that period to let the dust settle and regroup, essentially.
Oh, definitely. And journaling is a huge part of that. I mean, you and I both are
Yeah.
huge advocates, and not even necessarily. Um, I think many times people have a tendency to overthink journaling, like there's rules that apply to it, and it doesn't really matter
Yeah.
that you write. It doesn't really matter what you write. It matters that you write, and sometimes you can
Right.
start just write about your day when you're man. There's something magical that just, and I know you probably know the science behind it. Man, when you put a pen in your hand and that hits a piece of paper and you start writing, it just kind of frees up that space, and the things that
Yeah.
all of the reactionary, just hustle trying to get through your day, that is blocking some of the insight that you probably need, that can allow it to, oh, here's a download, here's an insight, oh, I didn't think of it from that perspective. um
Yeah.
I just know that that's something you and I we always have conversations around that, of whether it's guided journaling, whether it's just sit down and start writing. Beautiful things can come
Yeah.
from that, and it can really help navigate, and actually can help allow the dust to settle.
Oh yeah. And you know what's funny is I do journal, and it looks very different from now than when I was a kid. I mean, when I was a kid, I was always told, "Hey, you need to journal because you need to have this, you know, this writings of your life. What happened? Tell us about your day. And anymore, I look back on that and that wasn't anything that I kept up with because, ew, I don't want to really talk about
Yeah.
my day. Nothing happened. I went outside, played kickball for a bit and came back inside. Ooh. Um, but anymore, I now write about the things that I'm experiencing, the thoughts that I have, and all I'm doing is just writing everything out. It's almost as if
Mhm.
there's no filter. It's just whatever I'm thinking and I'm writing it down. And most of the time it doesn't really make sense, but every once in a while I get a little bit of a nugget where I go, "Oh my gosh, that's the insight I've been looking for." But I
Mhm.
couldn't get to it because everything in my head was just so
Oh,
jumbled.
yeah.
But writing it out helped me just figure out how I needed to process everything that was going on. And to me, it's very easy for me to figure out how, that one insight that I've been looking for. And what's funny is there's even times in my life where I'm not even writing things down or I don't have the journal in front of me. Um, I could be reading a book or maybe I'm walking, and if I have something that, some kind of the thought or insight, I'll just pull out my phone, talk into it, maybe write it in the notes app,
Mhm.
anything to just make sure that I just write that down because to me, that's how I am able to process the thoughts that I have. That's how I'm able to decipher how I want this change, whether drastic or incremental, whichever, wherever I'm at in my life. How do I want that to play out for me? How do I want that to look and to shape my life? Because these are now the thoughts that I get to externally see, decipher, decide, is this one helpful for me? Or is this one going to hinder me? Is this going to help me achieve the goals that I want in my life?
Oh my gosh, definitely. Yeah, same thing for me. Again, yeah, I remember when I was younger and it was, at church and we had to, journal. And
Yeah.
my experience was probably pretty similar to yours. Mine was, I had this big fancy book and whatever. I think I wrote journaling sucks like 20 times on a page. I just like, I don't want to do this. This is stupid. Why would I want to do this?
And
And
there's
then
some people who love it.
I,
And
I
I
envy them.
love that they yeah, I love
I
that
had
you
to
love
learn how
it.
to love it. Yeah, because
Yeah.
some people they love it and they're so gifted at it. I'm like, yeah, that's not me. But once I
Yeah.
finally threw all the rules out and realized it doesn't matter what I write, it matters that I write.
Mhm.
And a girlfriend one day suggested it to me. I just was in a state of overwhelm. She's like, just go get a notebook. It doesn't even have to be a journal. Just get a notebook and
Yeah.
just write. Don't think, just write. And I was in my late 30s, early 40s, and I still do it to this day. Here's my latest four. It's a notebook, and I just start
Oh, I
writing.
love that.
And when I get to the end of it, I just get another notebook, and it's yeah, journaling is incredibly powerful. I mean, we talk about several different types of journaling inside of inside of our program when we're working with clients.
Mhm.
So um yeah, it can be anything that you can do to start to get your mind to kind of slow down.
Mhm.
I think when you can get your mind to slow down and focus, it makes it so much simpler for you to slow down and focus. Wherever the mind goes, the body follows. So being able to do things that can help you slow down a little bit can better help navigate whatever transformation looks like for anybody right now, whether it is
Right.
that incremental piece that whether they've just made a drastic decision or whether they kind of feel like life is happening to them. I think that can be incredibly, yeah, incredibly important. But hey, before we wrap up today, is there anything else you want to add?
I don't think so. I really feel like that's a good place to end for today.
Cool.
Just with that message of just slowing down, taking those intentional steps to really help yourself settle back into your body, calm your mind,
Mhm.
because that's really going to be that foundation for what change looks like for you.
Oh, definitely. Awesome. Oh, thank you so much. This was awesome. This was fun. So thank you everybody for joining us today. You know what? If we shared anything that sparked an idea that made you think that that just, I don't know, made you a little bit curious about what we do here inside of Becoming Bolder, the program, and our programs that we offer. We would love to have you share, first off, anything, any insights, any ahas you had today. Drop it down in the comments. We really want to hear from you. And if you are navigating a change, whether it's intentional and incremental, or a little on the drastic side, whatever that looks like for you, if you're navigating change and you'd like to connect, please just go ahead and click on the link. It's down in the comments below. And schedule a free conversation with me and Rachel and take your first steps towards becoming bolder. So last but not least, please also subscribe for more conversations about becoming bolder and building a life that feels more like your own. So until next time, for Rachel and myself, keep showing up in full volume. Bye, guys.
Bye.